Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our February Multifamily Women's Mastermind Zoom meeting. Tonight we have a very special guest, Jillian Sidoti, that will be talking to us about raising private money legally, keyword legally, since a lot of people do this incorrectly these days. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Jillian, and then I'll let her have the floor so she can share her wisdom. Jillian Sidoti is one of the country's leading experts on Regulation A+. Since 2008, Jillian has submitted multiple Regulation A offering circulars to the Security Exchange Commission for approval, making her one of the few attorneys familiar with the law prior to the changes under the Jobs Act. Since the Jobs Act, Jillian has assisted multiple companies and entrepreneurs realize their fundraising goals through crowdfunding, 506C, and Regulation A. Jillian also continues to specialize in transactional legal matters such as private placement memorandums, S1s and S11s, and Regulation D filings. Jillian also spends her time speaking at seminars educating real estate investors on how to legally raise capital for their real estate investment projects. Jillian is the author of the highly rated book, The Crowdfunding Myth, which debunks the multiple myths surrounding crowdfunding and teaches the reader how to effectively crowdfund their securities offering. Speaking of her book, I see it there behind her. If anyone would like to see the cover.
If you guys want a copy, I'll send it to you. Don't buy it. If you like it, rate it on Amazon, but don't go buy it because it's a little out of date. I'm writing a new book right now, so I'll be happy to give everybody a copy after this is over. But I don't want you spending $10 on it.
That's very generous of you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So prior to her legal career, Jillian owned and operated a record label, enabling her to tour worldwide with artists, including visiting South Africa, Canada, Europe, and the United States. Using that experience, Jillian has been commissioned to write articles and contracts for many music industry entities. For several years, Jillian taught finance and accounting for the BS and MBA programs at the University of Redlands, drawing on her experience as a financial analyst, controller, and CFO for many companies from manufacturing to real estate development. Jillian also teaches a small business management class where students are taught the anatomy of the business plan. So that being said, Jillian, I'll let you take over from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me tonight. It's a rare day where I get to speak to only ladies. That's really cool. So, you want to share? Okay. Timmy's got this. All righty. You ready to go? All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to raise capital effectively and legally. I'm going to buzz through these slides. So if you miss anything, don't fret. I have a chart at the end that you guys can all download and get. That will help you figure out the law. But I'm going to buzz through these slides because I want to be able to take your questions. And some of you have some probably really personal questions. There's 44 of you here. And so I want to make sure that I get to you and your questions. Okay, here we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is where I want your mindset to be. And I really want your mindset to be thinking about your business. So on the left-hand side, we're talking about the ways we go out and raise the capital. And then the right-hand side, we're talking about the channels which we use to raise the capital, or how we reach those investors, really, like on the right-hand side. So on the left-hand side, there's some questions on the bottom there. And these are the questions you have to ask yourself. Where's your business? Like, where are you right now? Are you looking to raise $1 million? Are you looking to raise $10 million? Are you just starting out? Are you very experienced? Where is your business? And then the next thing you want to ask yourself is, who are your investors? And a lot of times what I get from people is that, well, I don't have any investors. And that's fair, but we all have a network. So you need to look into that network and see who's in that network, because those are who your investors probably are. And if you don't have a network, or you're living in a trailer park somewhere with no friends and no family, then maybe you don't have any investors. But get out of the trailer park. And by the way, mobile home parks are great investments, but That's not what we're here to talk about, right? Get out and go and find some friends and start networking. And then you have to think about how much money do you need, and what do you really need to be successful. I run the gamut. I had a guy call me today and go, I go, well, what do you want to do? He goes, well, I don't really want to raise a lot of money. I just want to raise and I swear to God, I thought he was going to say $10,000 to $15,000, and he says $10 to $15 million. I'm like, that's a lot of money, dude. That's a lot of money. So you kind of want to think about how much money do you need. So then on the right-hand side, we're looking at, how are we going to go out now that we know what we need and who we are and who our investors are? How are we going to reach those people? Are we going to use a portal, like a crowdfunding portal? Are we going to do content-based marketing, which is, education-based marketing? Or are we going to go out and network and dial for dollars? So the things you have to consider when considering those things is, what are you comfortable with? What is your business? What is your business? Sometimes your business doesn't work for a crowdfunding portal, for example. And then what is your budget? Do you have a budget to spend on raising capital? And what I mean by that is, do you have a marketing budget more than anything else? Do you have money that you can spend on technology to help you raise capital? So these are kind of just the things you want to think about internally, and write down to brainstorm how you're going to fit all of this stuff into the law. So let's get into the law. And this is where, well, not quite yet. We don't get quite complicated yet, but here, I just want to give you a lay of the land, a little bit of a history lesson, because you really want to kind of understand, how did we get here and why is this important? I mean, a lot of times what I get when somebody's hearing this law that applies to raising capital for the first time, they don't understand why we have it. One comment I got online the other day was, why can't the government just leave us alone and let us make deals and take money from people? I don't know why we have all these laws. Well, I agree and I disagree. And the reason why I disagree is because of what's happened in our history. Back in 1928, we had a terrible depression, and at that time, a lot of people lost money because of the fraudulent acts of others. So what happened was, in 1933, FDR came out with the New Deal. And part of that New Deal was what I refer to as the Mac Daddy of securities law, the Securities Act of 1933. Still good law today. It's there to protect investors. That is the purpose of the law. It's not to come down on you as real estate entrepreneurs and make your life more difficult. It's really to protect the investors. And in the end, it actually protects you as well, in a strange way, because it takes away the he said, she said element of deal making, and it puts pen to paper. So fast forward to 1946, we had a case called the W.J. Howie case, which I'm going to get to in a second, which really defined when all of this applies, when we have to worry about securities law and what securities really are. And then in 2012, we had the Jobs Act, which was the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act. And the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act is the crowdfunding law. So it's what made crowdfunding legal. And the following years, 2015 and 16, is when they rolled out the rules regarding crowdfunding. And now crowdfunding is completely legal. And we have all these new great rules that help us raise capital. And really help us raise capital here in this digital age. If it wasn't for the Jobs Act, so many people out there would not be raising capital right now, because they wouldn't be able to. As a matter of fact, Grant Cardone, who we were talking about earlier, raises all his money thanks to that Jobs Act. He goes out into the public and raises money using exemptions under the law. So I had mentioned the W.J. Howie case, and the W.J. Howie company was actually a farm that grew oranges, and they had these parcels of land that they had a parcel of land that they decided to subdivide into 1 acre parcels, and they sold the 1 acre parcels to individual investors. So they gave title to those parcels of land to individual investors. And the investors, all were excited, because what the W.J. Howie company had said to them was, you're going to buy this piece of land, but what we're going to do is we're going to farm the land for you, and we're going to gather all of the oranges, and we're going to sell all those oranges, and we're going to make money on the oranges, and then we're going to give you the money that we make from the oranges from farming your land. And it didn't work out, and everybody lost their money. And the W.J. Howie Company investors sued W.J. Howie Company, and on the basis of securities fraud, saying, look, you defrauded us. You didn't tell us we could lose all our money. This is awful and terrible, and we're suing you, and we want our money back. And the W.J. Howie Company said, no, we didn't sell you a security. We sold you a piece of land. You can't say we sold you a security because you still own title to that land. Just because you lost all your money doesn't really mean anything to us. And the Supreme Court disagreed with W.J. Howie Company. They agreed with the investors, and they came up with a test that is still good law today. And here it is. They said, hey, W.J. Howie Company, you had these investors invest money. So there was an investment of money. There was more than one investor. In other words, there was a common enterprise. Different investors were coming in with money, and all of that money was going for the same particular purpose, which was to enrich the W.J. Howie Company and farm the land. 3, there was an expectation of profits. The investors did not buy this land so that they could build a home or eat the oranges themselves or make orange juice. They had a complete expectation that the W.J. Howie Company was going to sell those oranges for them and distribute profits to them. And then finally, they also had an expectation that through the efforts of a promoter, the W.J. Howie Company was going to actually do all the work. The investors didn't think, oh, I have to come now and farm this land and sell the oranges myself. No, they fully expected the W.J. Howie Company to do it. So if you meet all those 4 prongs, there's an investment of money, there's more than one investors, the investors all expect profits, and there's a promoter that is going to be doing all the work, then you're selling a security. And why is this important? Well, because then we have these laws that apply. But before we get to the laws, let's take a look at the different types of investors, because actually the law discriminates with investors. And so we need to know who are the investors out there that we can be dealing with before we can look at the law itself. And there's 3 levels of investors. And our number one top type of investor, our least protected investor, is the accredited investor. This is somebody who makes $200,000 a year as an individual, $300,000 a year as a married couple, or has $1 million in net worth exclusive of their primary residence. Our number 2 investor is a sophisticated investor. And this is somebody who maybe doesn't have the income or the net worth of an accredited investor, but they have an understanding of what the risks are associated with investing. And so they can bear those risks. They understand those risks. Those are the 2 factors that they need in order to be a sophisticated investor. And sophistication is fluid, right? It's also really subjective, right? Whether somebody's sophisticated or not. We don't have any good statistics on sophistication and who a sophisticated investor might be, because the reality is knowledge is constantly changing. And sophistication is constantly changing. So it's hard to measure that. So you have to be really objective for a very subjective test when you're looking at an investor and saying, are you sophisticated enough to invest in my deal? Do you understand the risks associated with investing? And then finally, we have unaccredited investors, and that's the rest of the population. These are people who might not be very sophisticated, but they also don't have the income or net worth requirements of an accredited investor. Okay. So let's talk about the 4 buckets of law. And for now, I'm going to just stick to these 2 middle buckets here, 506B and 506C, because ladies, that's really what's going to apply to you. Crowdfunding on the left-hand side in its purest form is called Regulation CF. Regulation CF is usually for companies that are not real estate related. As a matter of fact, I only know of 2 now. I'm aware of 2 companies that do Regulation CF offerings. That's a company called Buy the Block and another company called smallchange.org. This is not for you. The most you can raise under Regulation CF is $1,070,000. So obviously, if you ladies are going out and looking for bigger multifamily properties, $1,070,000 is not for you. And some of you might be saying to yourselves, but Jillian, maybe I only need to raise $750,000. Then wouldn't it work for me? Well, no. And here's why. Because the limit to an investor on a Regulation CF offering is that they can only invest up to $10,000. That doesn't work, right? And the average Regulation CF investor invests $250. So we really don't want that type of investor. We want investors who are going to invest $25, $50, $100,000, right? On the far right hand side, we have mini IPO Regulation A. This is what I'm talking about that Grant Cardone does. These are public offerings. And so we're not really ready to do those yet until you have critical mass, until you've done a bunch of 506Ps or 506Cs, which are in the middle of the screen here. So now, if you'll remember, I had described the Securities Act of 1933 as the Mac Daddy of securities law. Just for a minute, imagine that the law is a tree. And at the top of the tree is the Securities Act of 1933. Below that are different regulations, and these regulations tell us what to do. They tell us that whether we have to register or with the Securities Exchange Commission, or we have an exemption. One such exemption is an exemption called Regulation D, and I bet a bunch of you have heard of Reg D before. Under Reg D, there are rules, and those two rules that we're thinking of are 506B as in boy and 506C as in Charlie. Under 506B, we can raise as much money as we want. We can take in money from our number 2 type of investor, the sophisticated investor, up to 35 of them, and we can take up to as many accredited investors as we can find. However, you can't do any general solicitation. So all these syndicators now that you see out there saying, looking for investors, earn 8%, or they're not saying that. They're saying stupid things like earn 25% on your money. That's stupid. And we'll get to that in a second on why that's dumb. But they're saying these ridiculous things like earn this ridiculous rate of return on your money. Call me today. They're not using 506B, or they better not be using 506B, because under 506B, you cannot do that. You cannot use what are called means of general solicitation, which is like advertising or anything like that. There are other ways to get your investors through the door without using advertising, and there's plenty of people out there under 506B raising capital that way. Under 506C, general solicitation is allowed. So that's what probably all these guys out there that are doing this, where they're offering, these great returns and saying, invest in my multifamily property or come to my webinar and find out more. They can only take accredited investors, and you have to verify that they're accredited. So no sophisticated investor. So even if your Aunt Sally is your best aunt in the whole entire world and you love her so much and she's your biggest fan, if she's not accredited and you're doing a 506C offering, she cannot invest. Okay, so let's move on. So where can you advertise? Under 506C, Regulation A, and Regulation CF. Under 506B, which is actually the most popular way to raise capital, you cannot use advertising. You cannot put Facebook blasts and email blasts or kind of blasts or TikTok your way to riches. Are any of you on TikTok? No, you're not 15, so I wouldn't expect you to be on TikTok. All right. So here's a little breakdown of the rules. I'm going to get to your questions soon. You can screenshot that if you want, or I guess this is on a recording, but if you don't want to screenshot it, don't worry, because I got something for you here. Hold on. If you guys, I have a very comprehensive chart that breaks down all the rules for you. You got to really be specific about this. You got to send an email to crowd@crowdfundinglawyers.net with the subject line helpful chart. It's going to automatically send you this chart you see on the left-hand side of the screen. You can print it up, put it next to you on your desk. Think of me fondly when you look at it, memorize it.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yep, it's helpful chart in the subject line. And then you're going to send that email to crowd@crowdfundinglawyers.net.
Thank you. Let's see.
I mean, this is what I love about this particular presentation. It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, it gives you the high level stuff that you need to know, and it gives me plenty of time to take your questions. So I'm ready to take your questions. Candace, can people just unmute themselves? Is that how we can do this, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, whenever you're ready to ask a question, just make sure you unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You said we're not allowed to advertise the 506B,
Yes.
but can you advertise, say, a meetup to get people in to talk to them about, not so much solicit money, but to tell them about the opportunities that there are?
A visa, like a
meetup.
a what?
A meetup.
Oh, a meetup. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let me tell you how to do an effective meetup.
Yeah.
Here's what you're going to do. And this is what I want to back up and emphasize that 506B is the most popular way to raise capital, and you can't even do any general solicitation. So how are these people raising capital? What they're doing is if we go back to the very first screen, I had something up there that said content. So you're doing content-based marketing. So let's talk about a meetup specifically. You have a meetup, just get people together in a room, talk about multifamily, share your knowledge, gather information, and then and establish what we call substantive pre-existing relationships with people in the room, which means that you get to know them, you get to know what their financial situation is, you get to know if they're qualified enough to eventually invest in a deal. And then at that point, after you're done doing that for a while, or not even a while, you could really just do it one time and make an established relationship. Then you can go back to them and say, hey, are you interested in this deal? And the other thing I want you all to consider too is, ladies, if a guy ever asks you to marry him on the first, would you say yes? And if one of you says yes, we'll talk later. No, you wouldn't. That's crazy, right? That's crazy. So my hope for you is that you date to marry when it comes to investors. So you are dating your investors just like they're dating you, and you wouldn't ask them to invest on the first date.
No.
So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anybody else? No questions? Really?
I've got a question, Jillian. This is Maria.
Hi.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm doing my hair. I figured this would be the only meetup where that'd be okay.
That's awesome.
Okay, so my question is more so related to, and we've kind of talked a little bit about this. Can you kind of help us to understand how we could potentially be compensated for focusing on just the capital raise aspect of any deal? Because obviously we need to be cut into the general partnership in order to fly under that exemption, since we're not broker dealers. So
yeah.
Yeah.
My suggestion to you would be, and I think I told you this one, but this might help everybody else, is to look at a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Roll and what he does. Jeremy, what he does is he does a thorough due diligence on every deal he goes into, and then he usually cuts a deal for his personal investors. So he creates his own fund documents where he writes up his own PPM, his own offering, and then he takes that offering, and as part of that offer, part of that fundraise, he will go to the sponsor and say, look, I have these investors. They are trusting me with their money. They're trusting me to do due diligence on you. And what you're going to do is you're going to give my fund a piece of your, acquisition fee, or you're going to give us a piece of the GP. Our fund is going to get a piece of the GP. Although I'm not really in love with the piece of the GP, because then if the GP ever gets sued, you're going to get wrapped up in that. So my preference is that you look for other ways to take capital, and then you're going to charge your fund for fees for doing the work and the due diligence that you did for them. So the money's going to flow like this, where the syndicator over here, you're over here. The syndicate, your fund is over here. Your syndicator is going to give you some kind of fee. They're going to give you a fee for a due diligence fee, because that's what your fund charges to do due diligence on any fund. They're going to pay you a piece of an acquisition fee maybe, or they're going to give your fund a greater percentage rate of return, whatever those things might be. And then it's going to go into your fund. And then from there, you're going to charge, management fees, as ongoing management fees, procurement fees, whatever those fees might be. And then you'll make distributions to yourself, and you'll make distributions to your investors. And that's really the best and safest way to do things, and not necessarily bring your investors in. I would take the Realty Mogul's another one that does this, by the way. Realty Mogul, if you ever invest in something in Realty Mogul, you're not investing in that sponsor directly. You're investing in a special purpose entity that Realty Mogul set up to take care of their part of the capital stack. So you're like invested in RM 131, which is then investing in the entity, and RM 131, you bet your bottom dollar that they're getting paid by that sponsor for being listed on that property and putting that together for you.
Gotcha.
Jillian,
Yeah.
sorry, just in relation to that, I've gone to syndications, and I've actually asked them about that specifically. What if I get investors from Australia investing in the syndication, and I do it under an LLC in the US, so we pay taxes in the US and everything.
Okay.
But they've always come back to me and said, sorry, we can't pay any commission or anything like that.
That's true. No, they're not wrong. They're right.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying to Maria, is that she should not be taking commission. Instead, she should be looking for some other metric, for some other responsibility, not for raising capital. You cannot get paid a commission in the United States for selling securities if you're not licensed.
Okay, got it.
So they're not wrong about that. So you have to find another solution to that. And I get that you're putting this together. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, look, you're going to pay my fund a higher rate, and I'll get my money for managing the fund or whatever, or managing the investors. And I'll be responsible going forward for my investors. I'll be responsible for this LLC. And you create this barrier between your entity and your investors and the rest, and you are their spokesperson, their representative going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That really helped me. Where can I find information on how to do that? Do you know anyone that information?
Yeah, we have a great video. I gotta find it online. It's on our Facebook page.
Okay, and what's the Facebook?
If you can look for it, our Facebook page is Crowdfunding Lawyers. And if you look for the Facebook page and look for a video, I'm wearing a blue dress and I'm with my partner, Jean, and my hair looks ridiculous. It's all puffed out in that video. It drives me insane. I got to recut the video. But until then, go find the video. And in that video, we totally break down how to raise capital for other people.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh,
this has
you're
been
welcome.
so helpful.
Just look for the video with the bad hair.
Okay. I'll look for the blue dress. I don't think you could have bad hair.
So Jillian, getting back to kind of that structure, and that is what we talked about that other day. It really makes sense for us to leverage content-based and education-based marketing in order to really build an investor base before we can go to syndicators. Like, I'm kind of trying to figure out what the order of operations is, right? Because I'm going to be valuable to syndicators and operators if I can come to the table with significant money from other investors, right?
Right. And that's really what you want to do, is you want to be able to create this platform of education. And I know some people who've done a really good job with this. But that I feel like, and you and I can talk offline, Maria, but I feel like, you got to take that extra step to have the fund between you and the syndicators, because the issue for me is that if you're not acting as an advocate for your investors, you're going to get wrapped up into that GP in case there's a problem. I'm seeing this happen right now, by the way. Yeah. This isn't coming out of nowhere. I'm seeing right now folks like yourself who, with all good intentions, took their investors, brought them to a syndicator, and then became part of the GP with a GP who perhaps was not exactly doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And now the person who brought all the capital in is getting wrapped up into the problems that the GP has. So I don't want that to happen to you. And the best way to shield yourself against that is to have your own fund, your own LLC, and say, look, I'm responsible for all these people over here. I'm not part of your GP. We're just another investor in your deal.
So in that case, one of the things that I'm having difficulty is sort of, is this something that is a one-woman show, or is this something that I'm going to want to have a team for? One of the needs that I think that I know I have for sure is I need deeper expertise with underwriting to really determine whether or not a deal that I'm being presented is truly a good deal that I'm going to want to present to my people. So what's your feeling on, is this a one-woman show, or is this something where we need to really build a team in order to have that fund happen?
If you have what I call a needed weakness, then you should be building a team around that. And I would say underwriting is needed weakness, right? So in other words, you're weak in underwriting, but that's a necessity. Yeah. So you got to find someone who knows how to underwrite. So the other thing, it's so funny because I'm writing a new book, and the chapter I just wrote today was about your team, what your team should look like, and why you should have a team. And then another part of that chapter, I talked about studies on partnerships. And oddly enough, the most recent studies show founders with companies with one founder are more likely to survive than companies with more than one founder. So yeah, I think when you say one woman show, no, I don't think you should be a one woman show, but you should be the leader. Like, you should be in charge. This is your domain. What you say goes, and then everybody else falls in line behind you.
Gotcha. And so with regard to that underwriting, I'm kind of leaning toward having sort of like an independent person work for me on a case-by-case basis. So it's not really like I'm building, a payroll.
Right.
But rather the needs as they come about.
No, and I think I'll tell you this. I think that's exactly what you want to do, and then that way you can justify your saying to that sponsor, I need an underwriting fee, and then you take the underwriting fee and you give some to yourself and you pay the rest to the underwriter.
Gotcha. So it's also an opportunity to command more money because you are providing additional services there.
Right, exactly.
And it seems like this is also a way to kind of keep your investors to you, because I have heard of situations where, as a capital raiser, you may be doing all the hard work to bring the money to the table. You bring those investors to the GP, and now those GPs go find other deals and they're marketing those deals directly to your investors, and you're kind of left out.
Yeah, don't do that. And don't put your investors in those positions either, because most of the time when somebody's in a position like you, they're bringing investors to the table because these are investors that can't otherwise find deals or don't have time to, right? Mm-hmm. So they're trusting you to do right by them. And you're going to get compensated for that due diligence that you did. I mean, I have a group of guys right now who have two fund of funds, as we call them, one that's an income fund and one that's an opportunity fund in self-storage, and they underwrite constantly. Like they underwrite, then they close the deal. So that's the service and the value that you're bringing to your investors, and that expertise.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Jill. I have a question. This is
Sure.
So I just want to clarify. So you become a GP with no problem. I mean, the only time that you become in trouble is when you raise the money and you're taking money from other people, right? And then you get a part of the GP.
Yeah. The thing is that I don't like the whole getting a part of the GP thing, is because if you're not actually involved in the GP going forward, it's a false narrative, right? You're a GP. No, you're not. You're not really doing anything, right?
Mhm.
You're not involved in the day-to-day operations. Not only are you not, and then like, let's look at the other side of that. It's a false narrative that is being provided. Like, you're getting a piece of this GP that you really don't deserve because you're not really doing anything. A, and B, you're opening yourself up to liability for people. Now, obviously you trust these people.
Mhm.
You wouldn't be investing with them if you didn't trust them. But if they screw up and you're not around, you're going to be held liable for that. You're going to get sued. That's what I'm talking about mostly.
Okay, so the next clarification, the bigger clarification that I want to know is you can legally be a GP if you put your own money, right?
It's not even that. It's about being the actual general. I don't care about your own money. I care about the fact that you are an actual general partner that's actually doing day-to-day operations. A general partner implies that you are actually managing the company.
In other words, the actual partner.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not violating any SEC regulation if you're not taking any money. You're not responsible. In other words, you didn't solicit anybody's money. You just went in the partnership.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, that's a different situation, but I mean, still, I mean, everything, everything's facts driven. So to talk about it in a vacuum is a little difficult.
Mm-hmm.
There are some absolutes, right? What are the absolutes? We can't take commission for raising capital when we're not licensed. We really shouldn't be taking GP interests if we're not involved in the day-to-day operations or becoming part of the GP. There's a difference too in getting units. But you have to just make sure what the rule says is that you cannot have compensation, transaction-based compensation. That's what the law says. You cannot have transaction-based compensation. And what that means is if you transact money raising, your compensation cannot be directly tied to that money raising. So for example, if you bring $1 million, I will give you $100,000 in units. Or if you bring $1 million, I'll give you 10% as a payment. Like things like that, you cannot do. So that's what we're trying to basically avoid is transaction-based compensation, because the penalties are pretty high if you do that. And that's what we really want to avoid.
I guess what I'm just trying to clarify is that we're not violating SEC regulation when you're using your own money to get into the partnership and you're not raising money.
No, right. No, if it's your own money, it's your own money. No,
okay.
You're good. Yeah.
So I have a follow-up question to that. So what if your primary role in the GP is, say, asset management or, something operational, but then you receive additional compensation for also raising capital? So like, say you get 20% of the GP for asset management, but then you raise some capital, so you get 30%, like they tack on an additional, but all the capital raisers also have an active role in operations as well.
Yeah, the compensation just can't, I mean, that's fine in a macro sense. In a micro sense, you better not have that in writing that we're going to give you an extra 10% if you raise all the capital, because again, it can't be transaction-based compensation. Okay. If you want to make it that you have to be responsible for all your investors going forward, and whoever has the most investors is going to get paid more money because they're going to have more responsibility going forward. Do you see how I changed that to make the narrative work? Mm-hmm. So if Chat brings in 10 investors and Candace, you bring in 15 investors, well, Candace, you're going to be responsible for 15 and Chat's only going to be responsible for 10. So we're going to compensate you more. But it's not because they invested, but because you have to take care of them in the future.
Mhm.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So if I understand you right, so like if us ladies formed an LLC,
Yeah.
we invested in one of Grant Cardone's apartments,
Yeah.
and then he gets the list of all of our names, and then he would never do this, but let's just say
See this happen to you guys,
one
maybe?
year he gets all of our names and he contacts each lady individually and bypasses our LLC that we formed.
Who did this?
No, I mean, it's just a what if. Like, how do you keep your investors private? Like somebody asked earlier, like you bring all these investors and you form an LLC and bring it to a syndication. How do you keep the GPs from going around you next time they want to raise money?
Well, you shouldn't be giving the GPs their names, the
It's
investors'
that
names.
simple. You can just keep that private.
It's none of their business.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
The individual investors are not their investors. The LLC is.
okay.
If they ask you for that information, ask them why they're asking for that. And now, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What's a GP? I'm sorry, I'm listening to all this, but not sure.
Oh,
what a
general
GP is.
partner. We're
Okay.
like, and really we're talking about the manager of the LLC, but we use the term general partner just to differentiate of who's in charge. But yeah, they shouldn't be doing that. And you shouldn't be giving them your investors' information. There's no reason to. Realty Mogul certainly doesn't give my information to syndication that I invested in on their portal. As a matter of fact, it was funny because I invested on a syndication on their portal, and about 6 months later, that sponsor called me and was like, oh yeah, we want to do a deal. Can you help us out with the deal? And I said, I invested with you guys on Realty Mogul. And they're like, oh, really? That's great. Like they didn't even know I was an investor. And that's how it should be.
Okay.
Hey, Jillian, this is Sandhya.
Hi.
Hello. I
Look,
don't
I
have
got you 2 days in a row. Wow. You're like really into this.
Oh no, I think there is one more Sandhya. Often people confuse me with her.
Oh,
So
no, it is. No, because now you put your camera on and I see you and you're not the same. Sorry.
exactly, I just put my camera on. Sorry, pardon me. I just came out of my workout. Jillian.
No, you're fine.
But on the same note, I have a question. So you were saying that like the GPs would never know the contacts of the investors, right? But when they are going through the DocuSign process and even when distributing the documents, they would have the contact. The GPs would have the contact, right?
No. We're talking about, you might have missed the first part of that equation.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about a very specific circumstance. If you're investing directly into an entity, of course the GP is going to know you. Of course, they have to know you. We're talking about we'll use Maria as an example because she's most likely going to do this. Maria has a group of Maria, where are you originally from? What country?
Colombia.
Colombia.
I don't know if that's the best example.
Well, let's just use it. Oh, Tim's cracking up laughing right now. We'll just say Maria has a bunch of friends in Colombia that are in business together and they all want to invest in property in the United States. And so Maria puts together an LLC and puts them all in the LLC and then goes to Renee's offering. And Maria says, hey, I have this LLC. I would like this LLC to invest in your offering, Renee. Is that okay? And Renee would not then know all of Maria's friends in Colombia. Renee would just know the LLC, which is the investor, and Maria, who represents that investor. If you're doing an offering and you go to your friends and family and say, invest, of course you're going to know who all your investors are. Or if Maria said, I'm just going to tell all my investors to directly invest with Renee and I'm going to do away with the LLC, then Renee would know who all those investors are. We're talking about in the circumstance where there's an LLC in the middle. Does that make sense? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, good. Yeah. I can't even imagine how confusing that was. Like, how do they not know who their own investors are?
Uh-huh.
Jillian, I have a question for if you're doing JVs,
Yeah.
like small deals.
Yeah.
Because I've seen this is done wrong, or I've heard that it can be done wrong also. If people put in money but they're not actually active,
Yeah.
then is it actually so? Where's the line drawn on that?
It's not so with the JVs. I cringe a little bit when anybody tells me they're doing a JV, because the concept of a JV is, if you think about it, is that two parties are coming together with particular skill sets or assets or whatever, and coming together to create something from those two JVs. And they're not creating a partnership, and they're not creating a new company. They're literally coming together. So it's like Verizon is going to put down the fiber optic cable and Spectrum's going to provide the service. That's a true JV right there, right? That's where two parties who have two different sets of assets that can come together and provide a service or provide something better. Or cell towers are another great example. One company's going to put the cell tower, another company's going to provide the cell service. I don't know why I'm into utilities right now, but you get the point. That's a JV. There's been this like trend of, oh, you bring the money and I'm going to do all the work and make this happen. That's not really a JV in the legal sense of the term. It's really just kind of disguising what is actually a securities transaction. So I tell everybody to be careful with that. And my caution to that is, in particular, is like, fine, if you do that once or twice with one investor, that's okay. It's when you involve more than one investor. You got to go back to the test, to the rules, and look at the test, the 4-pronged test. Is there investment of money? Is there more than one investor? Are they expecting profits? Is there somebody in charge? And if you say yes to all those, the JV is not going to get you out of trouble. You got to follow the rules. So that's really what we're looking at.
If it's a true partnership where you are coming together so you can distribute the workload, is that totally fine then? Like,
that's totally different. That's completely different. That you get rid of through the efforts of a promoter prong. Remember?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Could you share a little bit more about a Reg A fund? And I have heard that they're very expensive to start. Is that true? And yeah, I would just love some information there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell everybody to plan on spending about $75,000 to do a Regulation A, because there's a lot of stuff you need to do a Regulation A properly. You need the lawyer, and I'm going to be straight up. I charge $50,000 to do the work. And what we charge $50,000 for is to not only get you all your offering documents done, but to also get those approved by the SEC, and then to do your first year of reporting requirements, because you do have ongoing reporting requirements. And then you also need to get an audit done by an auditor. You need to have some technology. You need to have a platform, because there's no point of doing a Reg A if you're not going to have a place to process subscription agreements. And you also need to have a transfer agent, which is somebody who keeps track of your investors for you. And that's by law. You need to have a transfer agent under Regulation A. So for those of you that are sitting out there perhaps confused, like, what is a Reg A? A Regulation A offering is a mini IPO. It's what Grant Cardone does. And that is where we are doing basically a public offering. You can raise up to $50 million. You can do all the advertising you want. You can take in any investor you want. But like Jesse had alluded to, it's expensive. You know, like I said, I tell people to plan on spending $75,000, and it takes about 4 to 6 months. As opposed to a private placement memorandum, which we can get done in as little as 2 days and as much as 2 weeks. So you're really talking about a big difference.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually very helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I have a very specific question.
Sure.
This is something I've seen a lot of syndicators doing lately, and I'm just a little unclear from a legal standpoint if it's okay or not. I've seen a lot of syndicators raising extra capital and considering it like reserves and then paying back investors in year one just to meet prefs. So it's more like a return of investment rather than on. Is there anything wrong with that legally, or is that okay?
I don't like that. I don't love
like
that.
Is it legal? I'm just curious.
It's yes and no. Like, you have to be really specific that it's a return of capital. I've seen some ways that it's been deceptively done. I do not like it. I stamp my feet and bang my fists on the table anytime somebody even tries to suggest doing it. Now, I've had one gentleman who's been doing return of capital as opposed to return on capital for many, many years, but he doesn't overfund. He does it so that he doesn't have a taxable event every time he's returning capital to investors. So what he's really doing is taking distributions and calling it a return of capital instead of return on capital. So they only have one taxable event at the end, as opposed to taxable events throughout the life of the property, if you know what I mean. So in that sense, I'm totally fine with it. I do not love this whole return of capital. I fear that if there's even a small screw up in the bookkeeping, you could fall right into a Ponzi scheme, right? Because if you're taking more money than the project needs and then you're returning capital to investors, from new investors to old investors, that's called a Ponzi scheme. So I don't love it. And ladies, I know that's a thing right now, and I know it makes the project look really good because it cash flows on day one, and that's really exciting, but it's a false start. And I think there's some syndicators out there right now that aren't being very honest about it.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. And I've brought this up a few times before and haven't really got much feedback on it. So I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yeah.
It bothers me.
I'm Candace, I will tell you, and all you ladies, I will tell you, I'm way more conservative than a lot of my counterparts on this. And I have resisted that for a long time. That's not something I love. It's not something I love.
Mm-hmm. So with the return of capital, since it's not a taxable event, would that also mean that you couldn't take advantage of the bonus depreciation?
No, not necessarily. Because like, here's a perfect example. I'm invested in a deal right now, and I love bonus depreciation because I have a lot of ordinary income that I need to offset. So
for the people that don't claim real estate professional, though, which would be most passive investors,
yeah,
be able to offset your active income.
I don't know, in that case, I'm not really quite sure. I don't claim to be a real estate professional because I am a full-time attorney. So it's hard for me to do that. My husband does. He's the full-time real estate investor in our home. So that's how we can do it. And yeah, I don't have enough knowledge of the tax code. I know I will tell all of you at the end of the year, I scrambled to find whoever would give me whatever depreciation was out there. Give it to me now. Like, please, I can't pay any more in taxes.
So you said a transfer agent would know like the other names of passive investors in a deal?
A transfer agent would, but a transfer agent is a regulated agency. They wouldn't necessarily, they wouldn't disclose that information. Is that what you're asking, Renee?
Yeah, like if I want I want to offer my shares for sale and wanted to approach them.
You wouldn't necessarily, if you wanted, you wouldn't go to a transfer agent per se, because the company has to be signed up with a transfer agent. You couldn't independently go to a transfer agent. If you're in what are you in? Or what are you in right now that you're thinking about you want to sell? Do you have something specific in mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it a syndication?
Yeah.
Okay. So the syndication, you have to go to the operating agreement and see what the operating agreement says to see how you can sell your shares.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jillian, I've got to go. I've got a meeting at 2:30. It's still daytime here. So thank you. You have been so helpful.
You're welcome.
blue dress on Facebook and connect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You blow me away.
No, I'm so glad. I hope
these
it was
for so
helpful.
long, and you're the only one that's really just hit the nail on the head for me. So thank you so much. I
Oh, you're
really
very welcome.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you for hanging out. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Love it
Bye.
about you.
Bye.
Tim, can you go tell Tyler to go down to Taekwondo?
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, my little boy's going to be late for Taekwondo, so I got to send Timmy over to. Yeah, I'm sending my minion to do my bidding.
Do we have any more questions, ladies? We can probably take one more. All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, we'll wrap it up now. Jillian, we're so grateful for you and your time tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Always add a ton of value, and tonight was no exception, of course. So thank you for joining us, and ladies, thank you all for joining as well. Our next Zoom meeting will be March 11th at 8 p.m. Central with guest Maureen Miles. So hope to see you all there, and good night, and thanks again, Jillian.
Oh, no problem. Hey, Candace,
Uh-huh.
if you want, you can reach out to me and I can talk to you more about that return on, and we can discuss.